Welcome, everybody. Before we get started, just a little housekeeping on the app. We are able to accept questions from the app, which makes a pretty efficient way for you to get your thoughts out, and that way we can address them with the panelists. You can also vote other questions up, so if someone else asked a question that you want answered, I'll be able to see what gets voted up, so I can just try to focus on the ones at the top. I've been having some really good interaction because of the questions in the last panels. So thank you so much for marketing, joining us for Marketing Beyond the Numbers. We have an awesome panel of practitioners who are in the weeds every day and also kind of like thinking and living in the clouds. So Matt knows where I'm stealing that from, in the clouds and in the dirt. Gary Vaynerchuk's very concise way of putting it, but I'm really excited to introduce our panelists and to just have a lively conversation around something that is obviously very important and relevant to automotive today, because it comes to communication and bringing the person and the human into the data. A lot of talk about data. We need to make sure the human conversation maintains an equilibrium with that, or all of a sudden we start treating people like numbers and data points, which nobody wants to be treated like that. So I'm going to go across, let everyone introduce themselves and give a little context to what you do in the industry, and maybe your favorite football team. Only the first one, though. Yeah.
Hi, everyone. David Wren, co-founder and CEO of Stream and Full Throttle. Started Stream in my mom's living room 27 years ago, and have grown it from 2 people to close to 700 today.
I didn't even know that story.
Yeah. So, and go Eagles.
Go Birds. By the way, that is official panel decorum, that whenever you finish a sentence, you say "Go Birds," and that's how we know you're done. Just kidding. Unless you want to.
My name is Erin Sparks. I am from Denoyer Automotive family. We have 5 dealerships in the greater Michigan, Southwest Michigan area, 2 Chevrolet, 1 Ford, a Toyota, and a Jaguar, with more to come. And I am a Packer fan.
That's okay.
So you can love me later.
Hey, Reggie White played for both.
That's right.
That's right. You did.
She played for
You
both,
did.
so we'll accept it.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Kimberly Barta. I'm the CMO of Group One, and I'm passionate about this topic because what I think of when I think of our job is that we get to know people really well and hopefully be interesting enough, compelling, and memorable that they become customers. And then we stick with them, and with the promise that those people will hopefully become fans, promoters, and then advocates. So this is something I think about all the time, what we're going to chat about today. I am a fairly recent transplant to Texas, and I have learned that people in Texas know how to do football. I went to my first Texans game. We're not great, but we're going to get better.
At least it's not Dallas. Everybody says. Thanks for just being good sports about all this. Go Birds. Your turn. I'm just kidding. All right, we're done with that for real until the end. Kimberly, why don't you just give us a little bit of your background into the industry, because I think it's very relevant to the conversation. You have a background that isn't the typical path through automotive marketing, as if there is one, but I think your experience in retail and brands outside of automotive is a very relevant context to why the way you think is, in my opinion, the way auto dealers in general should be pivoting their minds to think about retail and connection.
Well, sometimes I feel like an interloper, but I'm sort of an insider, outsider. I spent most of my career in lifestyle brands. And what's exciting about auto is, first of all, I think it's a huge privilege to help someone with what is often, their first or second most expensive thing they've ever purchased. But for me, it may sound trite, but it's really about blending the art and the science. And if I'm really working on how do I use the data to create more personal, individualized experiences. So for example, if I'm at the store and I know someone has spent an hour online doing a whole bunch of stuff, then honor that and meet them where they are. I think those transition points are so incredibly important. So I'm all about the data. I think the other thing I would mention is the art piece of it. I come from industries where you win with design and you win with unbelievable creative. And I think something that we are not great at, especially at tier 3, is creating remarkable creative. And there's absolutely no reason that we shouldn't be doing that. And again, I think we use the data and the insights to understand where people are and create incredible experiences.
Can you talk about the two of the industries? I know about Sorel and about Doc Martens, just so we have a little bit more context to, I just want to make sure we get good context that'll just give us a base for when you're saying these things, like where you're coming from.
I spent 13 years of my career at Doc Martens, and I saw it through like meteoric growth and then meteoric kind of not growth, and stuck around for the hard work to help make it a really important brand again. And very, very simply, I mean, there are lots of things you do when you're kind of fixing a brand, but it was cultural insights and really understanding people and doing a lot of listening, a lot of qualitative as well as quant. And then after that, I went to this tiny little brand that Columbia had bought out of bankruptcy, and that brand is Sorel. And it was my vision that we could honor its like historic past and its legacy with ski operators and men and snow and winter, but we could take it into the style space. And there's absolutely no way that we could have done that without a tremendous amount of qualitative as well as quant. Like I spent my first 2 months just going around America and listening to women.
Wow, listening. I'm gonna move back down, and then we're just gonna go all in. So, Erin, give us a little bit about your background into the industry and what your main trajectory is as the marketing director.
Sure. So I haven't been in automotive terribly long, so about 5 years. But the background before that was I was with a media company it's focused on news and information in the state of Michigan. And with that came a lot of opportunity to learn and listen along the way to local communities and understand like each community has its own vibe, its own understanding of what they want out of that. And I think that background continues to help me today because even though I was working with them in a retail space and then later on in automotive and then flipped over to the automotive side, I think that continues to help mold how we tell stories because it's my belief that our dealerships and our brand should be telling our story because that's the only thing that's going to set us apart. And so there's big changes that happened along the way when I stepped into the role, and they go from doing a million different messages about price and about price point and about options and about vehicles. And we stepped away from all of that to talk about who we are and what we believe, why we believe it. Yes, Simon Sinek. But using all of that to help us create a true brand that exemplifies who we are and not just what we do.
So let me start asking some questions.
Yes.
We talk about the word brand, and we use it, and we hear it widely used. There's some, I think if you asked 5 people, you'd get 5 different definitions. So maybe if we can come to a clarifying definition, or at least something close that we can all agree on, it'll give us a good pivot point to talk about bringing data into brand and like what the output of that is. So David, if you had when you say brand, you talk about the brand to your clients and to your own team, what do you mean?
So I think a brand is what you represent and promise to your customers, and living that through all your touch points. And I always say in this industry, and pretty much almost every industry, people buy from people. And we can have all the data points in the world, but if we can't make that human connection with potential customers, they're not going to have a great experience. And to me, every touch point represents your brand. And in this industry, I think sometimes we lose focus and we really think about all the other kind of data points before we think about what is the consumer experiencing, whether they visit our website, they pick up the phone and they call, they chat, they walk into the dealership to talk about buying a car or coming in for an RO, that we lose focus of the fundamentals. And to me, the fundamentals are the things we do each and every day that represent our brand from the top down. So it's the GM, the owner's job to create that brand, to create that culture, and to be able to communicate those why buys. And I think if we want to get away from being just transactional, it starts with that experience that really represents your brand.
Got it. So it's almost like it's kind of summed up in a touch point or an experience, if you will. That's where you're saying like people understand what it is you're really about, and that's going to just
To me,
go where it
brand
goes.
is culture exemplified. It's what you live every day, and what you should try to exemplify to others is what your brand is.
Which again would, in my opinion, tie in with that, because he's saying like the moment exemplified. Our director of partner success, Anne Marie, she calls these moments of truth, right? And every time you have an interaction with somebody, it's a moment of truth. They figure out who you are and who you aren't, right? And that really, when you boil it down, you're saying is like that's what brand is.
I have a really simple definition. It's what people
thought you
say
might.
about you when you're not in the room. And you better listen, because if it's really unaligned with who you think you are, you've got some work to do.
Great. So I feel like we have a little bit of a general understanding. So with all the talk about data and all of, not just the talk about it, the abundance and accessibility of data is just growing so quickly. And I think we're all trying to figure out what to do with it, how to get it in a linear fashion, how to actually tap into it and use it. How do we run the things and the learnings that we have with data and start to push it through this lens of brand to like market on the other side? I know it's kind of like a broad question, but I'm kind of interested to see where it goes. And also, if anyone, again, has questions along the topic or specifics, open the app, tap on our session, ask a question, and I'll be able to see them.
Paul, I think one of the biggest things is, knowing about your customers, right? And that comes into that experience. So if someone walks into my dealership and they've purchased 3 cars from me or have had 17 service visits since they've been a customer, you want to treat them like a friend. And I think in this industry, we get away from the marketing, the demand generation data, just looking at the data about our customers. And when they walk in the door, if they're a loyal customer, we better acknowledge that they're a loyal customer.
So you're talking like very like readily accessible data that everyone has in their DMS. Like, have they bought here before? Do they service here before? Right? Like, what have they bought? How often do they visit? Right? CRM, how often are they communicating with us? You're talking about that level of data.
Yes.
Right? Forget all the fancy stuff that I don't understand.
Right. No, and that's what I'm saying. It's blocking and tackling, and that goes back to, the brand experience. If I'm a loyal customer, I want to be treated like a loyal customer. If I'm coming in to test drive a new car, is the car ready for me? Am I greeted? Like Kimberly said, I already filled out a credit app, or I already submitted a price quote. I don't want to have to start that conversation again. And that's really what I think is about meeting the customer where they are in the purchase. And it might just be if you've got a service customer coming in that spent, I don't know, $7,000 in the service drive over their lifetime, like the service manager or the service advisor should greet them with some enthusiasm and appreciation.
Yeah. At least familiarity.
Yeah.
Right? How else? How are we pushing the data available through a brand lens? What data do you typically look at to inform even any of your marketing decisions or the content you're making or the storytelling? What kind of data are you looking at?
I think it's a combination of quant and qual. I mean, I really can't underestimate how important it is to get people in a room and just listen and talk to them.
Can you just talk through quantitative and qualitative,
Sure.
just so we can level set the room and anyone on the recording later?
So quant's all the math stuff, okay, all the metrics. We have tons of it. And what I think is so interesting in auto is we've always had a lot of it, right? It may not have all been together, but I know where you live. I know what your credit score is. I know where you work. A crazy amount. But, as you said in the beginning, people aren't data points. So how do we dimensionalize people? And I think some of my biggest insights as a marketer have come from sitting in rooms and talking to people. And I got rid of the traditional focus group a long, long time ago. Because it was expensive and it felt stilted. And I'm such a big proponent of it because it really is listening, but you do enough of it, you start to understand patterns. And I'm also big on it because it's accessible to any of us. You don't have to have a big budget. You either get your stellar customers together, you spend an evening with them. If you're not comfortable moderating, find somebody who is. Learn from the people who are buying from you and learn from the people who aren't buying for you. We're doing a whole work stream right now on a younger customer because I don't think the stuff we're doing right now is particularly great at incubating a younger customer who wants something really different.
How do you
And
define a younger customer?
how do I define? Probably the next generation of car buyers. So people who are like getting their licenses
Gen
now.
Z,
Yeah.
basically?
Yeah.
Okay. I interrupted you with that.
No, that's
but-
okay.
So quantitative, qualitative, right? And then where we were going with that is how are you, like what data are you looking at that's informing some of your other decisions? Is that how old, where you're buying, what you're thinking, focus groups? You said you did away with that.
Looking at all of the, the sort of regular stuff, how old, life stage, but also really pushing into sentiment. How are you spending your free time? What are you reading? Like, what are those passion points? Because I think understanding some of that helps with creating like really, personally emotional communication and experiences. We've always had a lot of that data, but I'm really interested in the sentiment stuff.
I think for me, I only have 5 stores. I think I only is maybe a weird way to say that
That's a
because
very
it's like a
weird
lot
way.
and not a lot all at the same time.
That's automotive marketer trauma right there. I only have 5 stores.
But the growth perspective from my own experience is that I went from having 2 stores to 5 in a really short period of time, and the ability to bring people along that aren't in the weeds all the time with the data, and I do it quarterly now, is to get together with a group of people and have them help disseminate the data in a way that is consumable to those that they work with. And so getting everybody from representatives from our tech team to our IT team to our sales team, and having them all be in a quarterly with us. And we look at things like even just overall, like how have sessions on the site been, to interactivity within different VDP pages and SRP pages, to looking at our reviews and understanding from a service and a sales aspect, what do those mean? Because there are top level data points that are relatively easy for most people to understand, but then I'm bringing those others that don't normally have that insight every day, and just helping them to come along that journey with us, because at the end of the day, it's a culture. And if I continue to only hold the data that is important to me and then share it only with the people that are at me or above me, where does that go? Generally, it doesn't go far.
Right.
So trying to help gather people along the way to be excited about this journey as well is hopefully key for us to have a better culture that everybody's going in the same direction for.
Right. It definitely helps.
That's a really good point. We have we stood up a CDP, cleaned up our data, and then did some persona work. And so we realized like, there's an opportunity here. Like just what you're talking about. It's like these 7 persona make up a really significant part of our revenue. So let's bring those to life and dimensionalize them for like our entire organization. We may be the caretakers of the data, but it's our job to share that with people. And then that led to like another work stream of people wanting more around those 7 profiles and having a much deeper understanding.
Yeah, and that brings me back to that. The first one I did, I felt incredibly dumb afterwards because they're asking me questions that some of them I can answer, some of them I can't. They're bringing up really great points that are from their lens. And so it only continues to help me exemplify our culture and our brand even better because I see it through their lens. So
I thought you were going to say something.
Yeah, no, I think, from a more tactical and strategic perspective of, what do we do with these audiences, right? So we know dealerships, whether it's a single point, a multi-point, are driving demand to their website, whether it's through paid search, paid social. We're creating all these, traffic opportunities. Where I think we don't do as well of a job as an industry is once we create this demand is creating the funnel of these audiences and how do we pull them through the shopper journey? Because let's face it, I think when you look at the data, we know that there's some type of people that, hey, I need a car now, I'm going to buy it. Most of people are in that, purchase funnel for 90 plus days. Yet we spend all of our money advertising, driving
the last few days.
Yes, we do. Versus how do we look at our audience strategy for, part of those audiences were previous customers. So how do we message to them? How do we message to all those new customers when we know they're shopping, multiple brands, multiple, things, and really why buy from my dealership? So I think that, one of the big takeaways that I think from a data perspective is how do you lean into your audiences and how do you make sure that you're spending, enough money of all that demand you created to keep people in the purchase funnel and hit them with the right message. And it's not always, come lease this Camry for $299. It's come, why buy from my dealership? The brand, the human aspect, et cetera.
Especially when they can get it multiple places as inventory opens up.
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other thing too is, when they're doing that, there's a lot going on in their life too. So they're not just thinking about buying a car. So I think sometimes we lose focus on, we do need to have that reach and frequency of messaging to make them remember, my dealership and why come in and see us.
I like how the conversation has just naturally migrated from high level back to tactical, because in the middle here, I don't want to pass over it. And by the way, I don't think the ask question thing is showing up in anybody's app. Now I'm seeing head shaking. No, you told us it was going to be there. How are we going to trust you anymore? But Danny Benitez figured out he could just DM me a question. Good job. So what we're going to do, I'll ask this question and then we're just going to go old school. And if you have a question, you can ask your question and we'll just repeat it so it ends up on the recording. But what I wanted to point out before we get to Danny's question is the part there in the middle where it was like, oh, we're going to meet and listen to the people who are tasked with executing the brand and those transactions and those interactions. We're going to have a two-way conversation. And what do those meetings look like now? Like you said, when you started doing it, because I think that's a critical component to marketing beyond the numbers. That's a critical component to having the front line understand what the strategy side of the business is trying to do with the brand. Because when there's someone in front of you, if it's not constantly drip fed into you, like you're going to like deal with a car transaction and not a personal interaction. So what do your meetings look like now?
So a lot of times I will bring maybe a handful of topics to discuss.
And you have, so let's back up. You have 5 stores.
Yep.
Who's in the meeting?
So originally I tried to handpick.
Yep.
And that kind of worked and kind of didn't from that aspect, because I wanted somebody that was very analytical. My F&I guys are super analytical. Then we've got our technicians that are like, let's just get this done. What are we doing here? Like, let's go.
Can I build this? Can I put this on an RO? Right.
And so I was trying to get people from all like their skills and capabilities. At the end of the day, I also just need people that want to be there as well too. And so the group is kind of ebbed and flowed. Some people come, some people go. But one thing that is good about the incoming group that we have is that they want to be there, they want to help, and they bring their own ideas as well too. So bringing some to the table, bringing them as well, kind of just ebbs and flows the conversation. If we get through 2 topics, I'm going to probably say we're doing really good.
And give me
but
some
that's
examples.
okay.
What are some topic examples?
So we recently launched a new website for acquisitions again. And so I asked them to go through it and give me your thoughts. What's the experience? What do you want? Because a technician going through it is going to be different than a salesperson going through it versus our IT guy. That's just like, I don't like the version of this thing that I'm looking at. And so people bring different perspectives to that. And it's really good for me to be a lot of times humbled by the ability to see it through somebody else's eyes.
Very good. Kim, do you have meetings? Like right, we have a small group. We have obviously a very large group. How did those conversations happen in a large group?
What I try to do is bring the voice of the customer in as much as possible. And I mean, we just fielded our first really large scale customer survey. And again, there's just so many opportunities to just bring that back. So it's not me saying it or my team saying it. It's just like, if somebody at the dealership showing me their numbers. It's fact, right? I'm trying to do the same and really empower people to get excited about what we're learning from our customers, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like, I don't believe in the theater of perfection. It's like, here's what we're doing really well. And try to be a catalyst more than like the driver. Get as much from them. We have smart people, right, that are working in our stores, and they are the interface with the customer. They're on the front lines. They have a lot to bring to it. I think maybe I just bring some insights and structure and hopefully the desire, like, hey, let's do more of this. When I hear that, I'm like, okay, we're doing something right here.
I like how you just said, like, I try to be the voice of the customer. And I think that intrinsically marketers are kind of in touch with the human side of the business in general. That's why a lot of marketers, I mean, obviously you have some data-oriented marketers, but a lot of marketers in a store like have to be involved in a lot of the human elements. My opinion on this is that representing the customer, being an advocate for what they actually think and what they're actually struggling is incredibly valuable in a marketing conversation in a place where that can easily get forgotten, or the only opinion of a customer is what's happening during the transaction, which is just such a, like a, I can't remember what Dr. Nicole Lipkin called it this morning. She said it's like, I don't know, like a very one-and-one understanding, like, I'm a presenter, you are the audience. Obviously, we're very much more dynamic and much more complicated than that. And when you're in a car sale, it could be like, you're the customer and I'm the salesperson, right? I'm more complex than that as the salesperson. You're more complex than that as the customer. And so advocating for that is I think a critical component if we're going to start to underlay or overlay brand on top of all this data and these numbers that we have. One suggestion I would make, and you know, I actually did this with a group in the room. I'll say who it is in a minute, but is you saw some examples of it while we have these men on the streets with ASOTU, and we go out, and just to give you a little background, no planning, right? We walk around and we're like, let's go over there and talk to people. We don't filter them. We don't set them up to say good things or bad things. And so yesterday I walked across the street to Costco, and people were loading their cars. I'm like, this is great. Or pumping gas. Like, what else are they going to do, right? and you ask them questions and you listen to exactly what they say. Why do you feel that way, right? Well, tell me about this. And so we did this for a group in the room, and we went around town and we say, when did you buy your last car? How was the process? What did you like about it? What did what made you anxious about it? And most people, and you don't have to do it personally. Sometimes you'll have someone in the store that can do it, or you can hire some Yahoo like me to do it, right? But, and I won't do that, but I'll send you ours. But we went around, and I think you could get so much nuance from that and break paradigms that you probably have. You definitely have, actually. I'll say that. The woman we interviewed, the one we played this morning, we're going to play 2 more throughout the conference, said, would you drive an EV? And she says, and we're just get done talking about in there, right? Oh, what are we going to do with it? She's like, I don't even know what an EV is. Literally, she did not know. We had to explain to her what an EV was. And so if that's not paradigm shifting for all of us who talk about that, she didn't even know. And we're not talking about someone who lives in the cave. She's literally the program director for this hotel. She does professional level program direction for a living. In this area, it's not exactly, like the middle of Idaho. No offense, Darren Doan, if he's in here. But we walked around for a group years ago, and we asked, what did they think about this group and why? And in this situation, not a single person said a bad thing about the group. They're like, oh, they're good. It was the West Her group. I'm going to give you some flowers, Matt Lasher. Everybody loves Scott Peeler in Buffalo. But I feel like that, when we talk about listening, could be a really effective in advocating for the customer. Are there any ways that you can think of, or you have done, where you've tried to get the customer voice, like not just a little louder, but like in front of your sales managers in an empathetic way?
Yeah, Paul, I think that's a great point, because I think there's two things to unpack there, right? There's what you're talking about, I think really helps with brand positioning, building a core value promise, those part of the consideration and awareness of buying a car. And then I think there's the details, right? When you're in the transaction, when you're engaging with the dealership, you have a different mindset, right? Like You're anxious, right? I think that's a big thing. You're unsure. You don't know if the person you're dealing with is trustworthy. So there's a lot of different emotions going through you when you're actually in the buying process. So I think there's two main takeaways from that. There's the evaluation of how do you go to market, how do you create that brand promise, but then as you're in the process, are we executing, those things? Are we, disarming the customer? Are we making them feel comfortable? Are we answering their questions? Are we helping educate them if they don't know anything about an EV or don't know the difference between, trim levels, et cetera? I mean, you got to remember, most people aren't buying a car, every 4 to 6 years. So it's not like they're not us. They're not living in this business each and every day. So it's, really detrimental if we think sometimes that they are. So it's really good to zoom out on both of those things. And I think you need to really hone in on both of them, because I think they're two different things we need to think about as marketers, and understanding the different phases of the customer, because they're not through the buying process until they take delivery of the car.
Right. Any other thoughts on getting the customer's voice louder? How?
I think, we always honor the data. And, sometimes I wish I were a data scientist, because I think it's an incredible discipline. But the data tells us what. It doesn't tell us why or how. So I think what I'm trying to say is dig deeper. Find something that surprises you. Don't be sort of satisfied with the initial things. I helped stand up a digital retailing tool for another group, and we had a lot of data. And I kept saying, we just kind of scratch behind the surface and find something more. And there was an insight that we found because we pushed ourselves to do it and we weren't easy on ourselves. It was all the regular stuff, right? Digital retailing saves time, blah, blah, blah. Okay, that's fine. But and we began to kind of understand who are our growth customers. And one of the most surprising ones was, we did a bunch of quantitative stuff. So we sort of understood the number of people who were in market every year, et cetera. But as we talked to people and we did the qual, this is during COVID, we found out that there was a whole group of people that loved COVID, because guess what? They are self-identified homebodies or introverts. And as we dug deeper and deeper and deeper, we came to some truths. Some of them were kind of uncomfortable about how being at a dealership was not a pleasant experience for them. Even going to the grocery store wasn't, right? They were just people that didn't like that. And we developed some work around those insights that we never would have done if we had solely looked at the data. So again, honor the data, but dig deeper and ask tougher questions. And just don't be satisfied with what's on the surface.
And you say that again. You said the data tells us what, but it doesn't tell us why or how. That's great. Write that down in your notebooks.
Just to piggyback on what Kimberly said, this blew my mind, and I'm going to ask the audience. So I was with an OEM last week, the CEO, and we were talking about audiences, talking about data,
you and Jim Farley just hanging out.
No, yeah, talking about shopper data, for really trying to understand the customer journey, right? And I think one of the big takeaways is the customer journey is not linear. And if you think about, this is an OEM, and we have most of the dealer data, so we can tell the audiences that are cross-shopping tier 1 and tier 3. I'm just gonna, someone take a guess of what you think that cross-shopping percentage is of someone that was on the OEM site and on a dealer site.
Somebody shout on a number.
Come on.
100%. Sub 5 to 100%.
So the sub 5 is closer because it was 10%. Wow. So it just tells you how much demand dealers create for driving traffic to their website.
That's a great data point.
So when Kimberly says dig deeper, it just tells you they're shopping totally different. And it also tells you dealerships can drive their own demand, and they don't need the OEM to always drive demand. But the fact that it was only 10% overlap, it actually blew the CEO's mind. And again, goes back to asking the questions like, why? Why is this happening? And how do we do a better job of capturing more shoppers and keeping them in the funnel?
All right, so we're going to get to some questions. We have 8 minutes left. From Danny for Kimberly, he says, how is Group 1 implementing the collective qualitative data, practically, into the purchase process?
That's a really, really important question. Right now, the qualitative is primarily through surveys. but I would, and not, not the little NPS, not that there's anything wrong with that, really deeper surveys. I do want to just get more people in a room and spend time with them, whether that's sort of top customers or defectors, and we haven't quite gotten there yet. Does that answer the question?
Danny? Yes. He sent me a DM. I'm going to say who it is. What other questions might we have for the panel? Go ahead. So it's almost like the question was more of an observation that from an outsider's perspective, even the terms that we use on a regular basis inside, especially marketers, we have a couple terms, don't we? Might not translate or don't translate, even things like EV or ICE. I wonder if we asked her what an electric vehicle was, right? And she would probably understand, right? And we're like, well, that's what it is.
Do you think
right?
she'd know it if you asked her what an internal combustion engine was?
No. Definitely not a PHEV. I don't even know what that is. And so what I hear when you say that is like there's an element of a big opportunity for education and like taking it down a level from how we think about it to actually build brand, because education builds trust, and trust is the foundation of like a good brand connection.
And I like what you said. It made me think of something that a planner once challenged me on. I'm like, the consumer, blah, blah, blah. And she looked at me and she said, you mean people? It's like, and I try to do that with myself and with my team as just a reminder, because we do get really caught up in our jargon. And so I'm glad you raised that.
Right. If you just say person, I mean, it's one of the reasons, we've all seen like movies when there's like a plane tragedy, right? And they say how many souls were on board, and they specifically don't say people because they want pilots and air staff to understand the high importance of a soul on a plane. Like this is something that is valuable, that is beyond just a person, right? So I think we can move from consumers to people with a little less intensity than that. Any other questions? Yeah.
Kim, I'm curious to know when you're doing your qualitative analysis and you're doing customer surveys, what are maybe like the top 3 questions that gave you the most, like the greatest insights into your customers?
Can you repeat the question?
What were in doing qualitative, what were the 3 things that were kind of most potent, or
Top 3 questions.
Top 3.
Yeah.
Well, the first was around customer experience, and I don't want this to be a commercial, but I was pleasantly surprised that people found us to be very consultative. It made me really happy, like really, really, really happy. The difference between someone who has not purchased an EV but would consider so in the future was a lot higher than I thought. And this won't be a surprise probably to anyone in this room, but price had a lot to do with it. If it comes down in price, I'm much more interested, but there was a lot of readiness. Third one is a little challenging and disturbing, and I think it speaks to just where we are economically right now with interest rates, is that people are already, these are people who bought a car in the last 2 years, okay, used or new. They plan to do their own financing for the next go around. So, the assumption there is that interest rates are crazy, and they like to figure that out on the, so that's an opportunity and a challenge. Yeah, thank you for asking.
Other questions? Yeah, I'm going to run the mic because we don't have to repeat it.
Sometimes I think we come up with language and we might pick a couple words and we think who we are for them. And then my question is, what data points, or we know language matters. So what if we are off and so their language is more important for who we are? What data points provides us with the language? Like you said, price. So like if you were to really quickly figure out how to disseminate language from like a marketing department down into the front lines? Where do you get that customer language? From data points.
I think you have an opportunity to A/B test some of your creatives, and that can tell you a portion of the story, but that's a little bit more reactive than proactive, obviously. We can also find data within the surveys and reviews that we get back. Obviously, we don't jump at the first negative opportunity that goes our way, but I think that all of those kind of give us the opportunity to do that. And then for me personally, that quarterly meeting that I try to always have that, an understanding of what those people are seeing and feeling as the front line will also help give that. So it's not always a numerical data that I think that the language comes from, but an understanding of the people that you're working with and the people that they're working with in order to help craft a better story.
Yeah, just to add on that, I know, the majority of OEMs, have that survey, have the survey information in the portal. And there's a wealth of information, that hopefully the GM or the GSM and the service director are utilizing those materials to review with the team. I mean, Kimberly talks about sentiment. I mean, you can see it in there, right? Like simple, do you plan to service your car here? Those types of questions. Was your, salesperson nice? Those things. So again, as an industry, I think sometimes we have so much thrown at us through the OEMs, partners, vendors, et cetera, that we forget how much information we have at our fingertips. So, a takeaway, I think is just, again, that survey information lives in most OEM portals. You can go in there, and I know most of you have to have a certain number of surveys to get paid your CSI money. So that information's in there. And I think just to, if you're having a meeting or you're using that as a guide, like say, hey, this is what the customers are saying about us. And this is what they're saying about our people. And certainly you can find trends and data that can point you in the right direction. And I think can have very healthy, thoughtful conversations.
And I think just to maybe follow up and piggyback on something you said previously too, I think the important part would not just be to read the data, but to ask why. And until I read a book recently, and I can't remember the name of it, but it elected you to never answer a question, but always answer with why. And so when you're leading someone else and they're coming to you with that, the same principle applies to look at the question you've already posed yourself and ask why until you can't ask why.
So
anymore.
basically take advice from my 3-year-old.
Yes.
It's pretty primal, actually.
I think what you said, I hope this resonates. Language does matter a lot. And some of that language that we find in surveys or in quant or qual represents like a human truth, right? And so then it's our job to sort of size that up. Is that a big enough thing that we need to do something about it? And not to pass the buck, but we've been talking about, the enormous expertise of people that work with data all the time. That's when I would go to the creatives and say, okay, here's this human truth. You help me figure out a way to address it. And sometimes the language that they use is really remarkable and surprising because they can go a lot deeper and they have but it's picking up on that human truth and then asking people who are extremely creative to articulate that in a way that makes sense.
Well, this is why I love the ASOTU community so much. I'm sorry we're out of time, but they're going to be here after.
I was going to ask what each one of them, what is your number one, do one thing, your takeaway?
We'll do that. What's your number one do one thing? What's the takeaway? If you don't do anything else, do this. Buy an Eagles jersey.
No,
okay,
yeah.
Okay.
It's so basic, but my number one takeaway for anyone that owns a company or wants to create an amazing brand is create a great experience for your customers, but also for your team members as well, because that's really the people that represent your brand each and every day, and it starts at the top. And if you don't have passion for your brand and what you do and wanting to help people, it's pretty hard to be authentic.
Thank you. Erin?
I would say mine is very simple. Ask more questions.
Kimberly?
Get some customers in a room, buy them a cup of coffee, whatever, and listen to them. because what they're going to teach us should inform what we do. It's not for me to decide what a great customer experience is. It's for them to tell us.
Well, Kimberly, Aaron, David, thank you so much for sharing some of your wisdom. I know you are all very open-handed, so I'm sure if you have more questions or want to reach out, that collaboration is where we all grow. Thanks for being a part of this session, and let's hear for our panelists.